Let's try again. Okay, I had to record it. Boulder Startup Week is recording this so that you guys can go back and watch it. Okay, now we're getting started for real. So this is the Who Am I in this Global Transition fireside chat with Greer Van Dyke. She's the founder of Windrose. She's going to talk a little bit about herself and what she does and what she's all about. But this is the Who Am I track. So if you're here, it's all about introspection and reflection and just kind of going over who you are as a professional and as an individual. That's what this track is all about. Boulder Startup Week, fully digital this year, thanks to a number of sponsors: Boulder's Downtown Boulder Partnership, CU Boulder, Techstars, Name.com, who I heard was still doing the taco giveaway today, so props to them, and Honey. So thank you guys so much for supporting Boulder Startup Week. And Greer, are you ready?
I'm ready.
I'm gonna actually stop sharing for real and make this like a thing. Okay, so Greer, spend a couple of seconds just chatting with us about who you are, what you do, and why you're qualified to talk about this subject.
Yeah. So Greer Van Dyke, I am founder of Windrose Coaching and Mentoring, and my work specializes in helping organizations, associations navigate change in a meaningful way. I have been in the outdoor industry. So I live up here in Steamboat Springs. I've been here for about 4 years and spent the last handful of years in the outdoor industry. And through those years have gone through my own, not unique to anyone, because, change is a constant thing, but there's some pretty massive changes and really motivated me to do this work. And so that's where we focus. And now more than ever, I think, with COVID-19, this is like the ultimate change, right? And so it's been just the irony of starting this work and starting this business at the new year is not lost on me. And I also have this conviction around this is what I trained for, right? And then I pull aside and I'm like, okay, how do I actually work through it myself? So, I mean, I'm in the trenches, because COVID is unique in the sense that it's impacting all of us no matter what. And so it has been such a joy to be able to do this work and provide support to companies and organizations that are really needing some support. So.
Well, and it's not just I think the thing, and you and I have talked at length about this in preparation for this fireside chat, but it's not just a transition that's happening as if you were getting acquired or going through a leadership change. It's a transition that's happening on a global scale. So everybody is going through it. So I want to first chat with you about what it is about our current circumstances and how it is a global transition that's causing us as individuals and business leaders and community members to show up differently. How are we showing up differently right now?
Yeah, well, and you named a piece of this. So the thing that really, to me, feels different about COVID-19 is no one has the perspective or the luxury to look in on this thing. They have everyone, no matter who you talk to, no matter their socioeconomic status, no matter how thick they thought their safety nets were, they are feeling the impacts of this on some level. And so I think just that is really forcing this new flavor of humility for all individuals. I mean, it's exposing all of our systems too, right? Agriculturally, financially, socially, financially, these systems that we've been leaning on for our human existence are now, the spotlight is on them. And so I think that is one unique element to this that is really causing these kinds of conversations to now need to be happening. I mean, I know, to your example, right, with things like acquisition and really those are things pretty specific to the people being impacted and perhaps their families, right? And now it's, you stop someone as a stranger on the side of the walk and they can have an experience with this whole thing. As far as how it's causing us to show up differently, I've been thinking about this a little bit, and how I put language to it is, I think that we are now seeing beyond ourselves in this really big new way. And again, I think it's due to kind of the just massive expansion of impact on all of us to this, but our hand really has been forced to care about, the elders in Italy, right? And to even be thinking about that, people in that way. And so it's forced us to really expand our lens on what our world is and how we exist in that world. And I think what I have really seen that I have loved in a lot of ways is what's stepping into place is intentionality and a true, genuine desire to support and care for one another. And I've really loved seeing some of those transitions. But I do, if I could just sum it up, I do think that, you know, how we're showing up differently is we are seeing beyond ourselves. And I think that manifests differently in everyone's world. But
yeah,
that's kind of how I put language to it.
Absolutely. And shifting from the mindset, I mean, we were on, economically speaking, we were on such a crazy trajectory of growth, and people, that was very much the mindset of let's expand, let's grow. And all of a sudden it just came to this halt.
Yeah.
So quickly. I mean, really, truly in Wuhan at the beginning of the year, but here in the States just about 2 months ago. And so shifting from that growth mindset to one of personal care or employee or community care that has had such an impact immediately, right?
Yeah.
We're seeing that happen so quickly. So kind of a follow-up question to that thought and that idea is, how can we be mindful in like gracefully making that shift given how quickly it happened? And we don't have the luxury to like ease into it. Like all of a sudden, all of us were working from home, those that were fortunate enough to be able to, but thinking about things like wearing a mask at the grocery store, or, you know, just shifting every piece of our lives into being more mindful and intentional rather than growth and prosperity. Like how can we gracefully make that shift?
Yeah, I do personally think that, you know, regardless of our hand getting forced and regardless of obviously like none of us asking for this and it creating some, you know, you've got to think quickly and you've got to act quickly. I mean, it is such a different use of the brain to relate to the world in, you know, when we are driven by expansion and growth and power and status, and to no fault of anyone's own. I mean, it's kind of the machinery, you know, to live in a world where those things make you look good, right? And those things get you the places you're wanting to go. And I would say that personally for myself, a couple things. I think it requires some slowing down, you know, regardless of how quickly this thing is moving. Like if we try to keep up with the speed of all the things and all the news and what do I need to be doing and what isn't okay. I mean, truthfully, it would drive me crazy. Right. And so I've had to really take a step back and focus in on what are the things that matter the most to me today. What are the things that I can be doing today on a really simple, fundamental level that are more a reflection of, you know, intentionality and transparency and connection with others. And it's not an easy question, and it's not an easy answer, because it's a tough question, right? That I think, and doing it gracefully too. When I hear the word gracefully, the thing that comes to mind first for me is compassion, right? When I think of grace, I think, what does it look like for me to engage with that shift with compassion? Because I historically have laced a lot of things with judgment and guilt and shame and needing to be quicker and needing to move more quickly. And I'm sure businesses are just really up against a lot of that of how, okay, we've always need to be pivoting, and how do I stay relevant, and how do I stay ahead of this wave? And it just feels so intensely overwhelming. And so I would say first and foremost, the way to approach this gracefully is to just take a step back and slow down for a minute and realize too that a lot of the things that, you know, we're needing or seeking in large measure are a reflection of that ego place, or of that like growth and expansion place, that really there's no rush when it comes to connecting with yourself. And I have found that when I am actually able to spend some time and consideration there, it actually does worlds and allows me to be in that space of expansion and growth a little bit more, I know, for lack of a better word, intentionally. So yeah. I don't know if that answers it, but
absolutely. I mean, for me, someone that hasn't I've been in the startup game and the entrepreneur game for like my whole career. And so growth is the name of that game very much, and keeping up and keeping relevant. And so I think this time for me is very new in how do you make space for that reflection? How do you make space for that, introspection of, wow, I can take a second to kind of slow down. And I don't necessarily have to be working from 7 to 7 or hustling, and there aren't happy hours and there aren't networking events anymore. And so like I spent the first couple of weeks of this being like, oh shit, like what do I do? Right. So I guess what kind of suggestions or tips or tools do you have for people to kind of work through that process for themselves?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what I do is values work. And so I would say so much of where this begins is with establishment of why it's even important to you. I think we get really caught up in the, oh, well, I should be creating time for myself, or I should be taking the opportunities to reflect. But if we are unrelated to actually why it's important to us, it doesn't fall on deaf ears necessarily, but connecting to why actually connects us to our motivation. And so oftentimes too, people are so insistent on knowing the how first. And I mean, I spent 10 years in the world of tech too. And 2 of my 4 brothers and my husband as well, like marinated in tech. And, the conversations that are still happening are, and well, were happening in a certain way up until COVID-19, but are also still happening in their own way, is like, what's the sprint to the finish line? So a lot of eagerness toward the accomplishment, and so I would say, all we're hearing is, taking more time for yourself and being more intentional. But if you can't connect within yourself why that actually matters to you, I would never say there's no point in doing it, because I think that there's value in learning through the process. But I would urge you to engage in that reflection first too. And that is a more involved inquiry, obviously, but I would say do why before you do the how. And that will make the how a lot more meaningful, and it will allow the how to be more sustaining.
Right. Well, and that's like Simon Sinek, back to the tech side of thing. That's his whole MO for your business as well, right? So approaching this from the perspective of, why is it important for me to do this work? But also as a business leader, the same question can be applied, right? At least in theory.
Well, yeah, hopefully.
Yeah.
COVID-19 for me, and Katie, you and I have talked a lot about this, pre-COVID-19, I started this business in January, and expansion, growth, achieve, like those were the things that were motivating a lot of what my plan looked like. And of course, I am very intrinsically connected to the work that I do, and I'm grateful for that, and I'm proud of that. But COVID-19 allowed me to really see that I was not leading with that. And probably 2 weeks in, I might say, I got really clear that if I continued in that direction, that this would drown me, essentially, and had a process for myself of saying like, okay, why am I doing this work? What is it about this work that actually means something to me? And what are those things? And why does it fill my cup? And got really clear on what those things were. And for me, it was service and contribution. And I got really clear that if I was able to lead from a place of service and contribution, that would be the thing to get me through this, right? It's not about outreach right now for the sake of securing a new partnership or getting that contract deal to go through. And that's what created room. I think when we're able to operate from that place, it allows room for creativity. It allows room for innovation, because the ego is up to pressure. The power of pressure is real. And if it's expansion, growth, et cetera, I think the amount of pressure that puts on us is so extreme. Whereas if it comes from a place of like, oh, if I wake up and the thing that I'm up to is service and contribution, it actually, then I'm connected to my motivation again. And then all of a sudden I have all this energy to do talks and the webinars and the presentations, because that's what people are needing. And I have way more capacity to be in the work versus like, yeah, but they're great. They just dropped that deal. And then I'm related to the pressure again. So just kind of from my own point of view, that shift opened up some doors for me that, you know, in some odd ways, I'm grateful that COVID-19 is happening because I needed to learn that lesson. And I'm grateful I got to learn it on the front end of this business. So
coming from, I know that you, in your previous life before Windrose, you've worked with more hard products and or services that aren't necessarily tied to mindfulness, which feels, at least to me, like an easier connection to service and contribution. For those people that own businesses that aren't necessarily a very quick apparent tie, how and why and when do they kind of start making that shift to think about, this isn't necessarily about profit right now, and that's not what's going to, obviously we have to have some kind of income to sustain our businesses, but it's not about, you know, the increasing profit margin right now. It's not in selling all of our products all at once. Maybe it is about shifting a little bit to better the larger community.
Yes.
It feels harder.
Yeah. So your question, how and when
I mean, as a product company or as a company with like a tangible, not just like a service or a mindfulness aspect naturally. Yeah. So say you're in the outdoor industry now and you think about, okay, well, we're obviously not selling any bikes. Bike shops are closed. So how do we shift as a business right now in this time to do that, to do those things, or as a leadership, like how do we take care of our employees, like developing that process?
Yeah. And it's funny, sorry to cut you off, but I feel like I get where you're going.
Yeah, please. Everyone, Gru and I have been friends for like a while, so she can read my mind.
Yeah, I'm like, you
great. Yeah.
Well, and you know, what you just asked right there is, I feel like, where almost 100% of my conversations have been going, you know, and this kind of came with my own process of like, you know, okay, I need to relate to purpose and values. I need to look for the need. I need to identify the need, and then I need to go fill the need, you know, like that became like this process that I was going through, and through some of the identification of the need. And I will get here. This is just kind of providing context.
Please.
Is, you know, leadership teams are coming to me saying, you know, we don't know how to have the candid conversations with our employees. You know, they're needing support as a leadership team. How do we make decisions? I'm feeling disconnected from my employees. How do we come together? How do we manage tough conversations? How do I manage a layoff? Okay, everyone's talking about purpose and value. How do I even go about the process of discovering my purpose and values as the CEO of this company? You realize like, and then in large measure too, what that's been prompting is I break this part of the conversation down through things you can be doing internally as an organization and things you can be doing externally as an organization. And for any of you who happen to talk to me after this conversation or know me from before, I am psychological safety in a work environment. I am the most passionate about this concept because I think it is one of the most overlooked, and, you know, not to single out tech because I think it occurs a lot elsewhere as well, but I saw it a lot in tech, and just in the circles that I still maintain of people who are in tech, you know, they say that, well, yeah, so psychological safety is essentially, you know, the mutual trust and respect amongst peers and departments and teams, and the willingness to be able to make mistakes and not be scared about repercussion, and the ability to truly be yourself, right? When there are barriers in our way, there is no room for creativity. There's no room to innovate. And so I say first to companies, well, talk to me about the psychological safety within your organization. If it's not there, that's where you begin. And there's a process for beginning that. And so I truly feel, you know, teams come together when there is trust. And if there is not trust, it makes it almost impossible for y'all to unite. And so I would say that's kind of first and foremost. The amount of employees too that I'm talking to right now who are terrified about their job and job security. But a lot of the reason they're terrified is because their leadership team isn't talking to them and keeping them up to speed with information. So for those of you who are listening, you know, to the extent that you can, talking to your teams, it's not that you have to share everything, but keeping them up to date with information makes them feel valued, right? And so I would say too, that the environments around, creation of this as a really solid foundation, that's where your energy needs to be spent. That will pivot you into purpose and values. That includes, being flexible in your environments too. It includes open channels of communication. And again, I get that it's hard to create that when, especially with organizations that have been around for decades, that are so ingrained in their ways of doing things that are falling apart. And, so I feel really strongly about that on an internal level. And then what I'd say externally is talk to your consumers. They want to hear from you, brands more than ever, consumers are looking at brands and looking at how they are acting amidst this time, including saying nothing, including pushing them to buy more. I would say that if you're going to talk to your consumers, which I highly encourage, being a consumer myself, it has made such an impact which brands are standing out to me based on how they're showing up for their world, how they're being vulnerable about their own fears that they're going through, which I really admire, how the sacrifices they've had to make, the changes that they've made. I would say talking to your consumers in a really intentional way, not pushing them to buy, but really partnering with them through this process, asking them for what they need. What would be most helpful from us during this time? I mean, I've had a couple of brands send emails and they're like, fill out this form. We are reading every entry. And they're big brands that it would surprise you. And so I would say, internally, externally, whichever ones kind of you're feeling or hearing this, that you're seeing some holes or gaps, focus there. I think more than ever, we need to come together. And I know everyone's saying that, but I feel like those are some real ways that can be done. And it's things within us that I feel like we all want, it's not I'm not asking you to create massively new behaviors, right? When we're able to connect to that part of us that really wants that anyway, it will, and this is what I've seen too, some of the work that I've done with companies, like how little it takes to move the needle. So.
Right. Well, and as you were talking, I keep thinking about if you're in tune with what you want and you need as an individual, and you can begin to translate that out to your community and to your business and to your employees or whoever that may be, fellow coworkers, like that's where it becomes the most powerful. So yeah. I do want to touch a little bit on the individual side of all of this, A, because it's the Who Am I track, but B, we're all individuals in this larger world. So thinking about us all, or a lot of us now, at home, stuck with our new coworkers / roommates / dogs and husbands or wives or whoever it may be, partners, children, it feels like a lot. There's a lot of uncertainty as to how long this will last or when it will happen, and there's burnout around that. So I want to chat a little bit about how you start to recognize that and lean into it and make space for your feelings and your emotions, but also continue to move forward a little bit and not get stuck or feel stuck, or maybe that's okay. Like how do you handle all of that stuff that's going on? Like, it's a lot.
Yeah, it is. And I've gone through my own really big waves of this. I think it's, I feel like just because I'm in this work, it obviously doesn't mean that I'm like, invincible from feeling a lot of this stuff. It's been such a learning process for myself, waking up one morning and feeling dread because, we're 7 weeks in, and it doesn't take much to like have that dread validated, whether it's a piece of news or a conversation that you overhear about the timeline with this thing. And so just on a personal level, I really, really get it. I'm all about simplicity. I'm all about simple exercises that feel really tangible, that I can grab onto in the moment. And I think there is an element of work that needs to be done on the front end for you to even be able to get to a place where you are recognizing like what dread looks like to me and what dread looks like to Katie are different, and and realizing like, oh, for myself, when I read the news, and again, it kind of goes back, like, what are my trigger environments as well? And so I've done a lot of work to notice what my behaviors are when I am in that really uncertain space, and what are the things that provoke that really uncertain space. And, you know, creating containment for the things that, if like, I don't look at the news anymore because it actually just does too much damage. And that's something that I can kind of contain. And there are others that you can't contain, obviously. So kind of as a preface, I've talked about this in the past. So two things. I've talked about one of these in the past. Well, I've talked about both of these in the past. One of them, Byron Katie, who's a woman that I respect very dearly in like the spiritual development world. You know, she has her 3 areas of business: my business, your business, and God's business. And, you know, my business are the things that I can control, right? Like, I can control not looking at the news. You know, I can't control how Katie deals with this. So if she does something that pisses me off, I really don't have a lot of say in that, right? That's hers, right? And, you know, timeline of COVID-19, that's God's. I don't have any real say over that. And so when I was able to really get a clear distinction for when I was in Katie's business and when I was feeling dread over a timeline, those are both things that I know I can't control now. And so some acknowledgement that I'm in that space and pissed off at Katie, which happens a lot. Acknowledging I've never been pissed off at Katie, truthfully.
That is, okay, that's not true. What, a little bit of backstory. One time, Greer and I set this recurring, like, let's watch a TV show date together, and I'm I'm consistently late for everything, and Greer called me on my shit, which was good. I mean, I'm less late now, but that was probably the one time that Greer has been mad at me, just for all of y'all's reference.
I've been pissed off at Katie once. I was so mad. Okay. But we had a breakthrough. So when I'm noticing that I'm in someone else's business, yeah, and then I can able to be like, oh, I'm pissed off and I'm in this thing that I can't control, or I'm anxious over this thing I can't control. What's one thing I can do that I can control? And usually it involves hugging my golden retriever, or talking to my husband, or taking a walk, or just, it usually has something to do with nature too. Like, so that's been a really helpful exercise when I find myself in that spot. I historically too have really not allowed any room to feel negative emotion. So if uncertainty or dread or anxiety or depression or sadness came up, I was, you know, it's in my machinery to push that away and actually to label it as wrong. And so these 2 questions that I've started asking myself that have just really shifted are, you know, am I okay? And usually the answer in those moments is no, I'm freaking out. And then the second question is that okay? Right. And with that simple secondary question, I can choose, like, oh, if it's not okay, what about this isn't okay? Oh, I'm being really judgmental. Okay, well, I can work with that, right? And it allows for some space. So those are 2 things over the last few weeks in particular that have taken me out of some funks, because I get triggered all the time. You know, it comes up all the time. And, you know, I think being in this profession too, people do come to me a lot and unload, you know, and sometimes the content of what they're unloading is very personal for me. And so it's up to me too, to really kind of put a check on that. And so those 2 things have been particularly helpful.
Are there any rituals that you've started through all of this that have, you know, had an impact or played directly during this time for you?
Yeah, it's interesting too, because I've also historically, pre-COVID-19, I was like, rituals are so dumb. I don't need to do them. You know, I'm mindful enough, like I'm connected. I used to tell myself like a ton of stories about ritual. And when I was thinking about this particular topic, who am I during this time? Oddly, ritual has been the thing that has most informed who I am during this process. And also something about myself and Katie is we usually cry during every conversation. So I noticed something coming up for me. I'm gonna squash that. But It's funny. And I was like, well, why do I have all this judgment around ritual? And ritual for me I'm like, well, it's just kind of like a little too spiritual. It's like a little too emotional. Like I don't need the shrine and, I don't need, all of these things that I think kind of, well, I made it wrong, whatever the reasons were. And I read this article that introduced me to like the science and the practicality, and the ritual is actually very pragmatic. And so it is direct when humans are able to engage in ritual in a consistent way, it is linked to higher self-esteem, lower levels of anxiety, lower levels of grief, which is like everyone is just constantly cycling through grief every day. So I want to say that I have had this massive shift in how I relate to ritual. I now meditate in a way that I never did before. And I actually lean on guided meditation. It just helps me kind of get to that place a little more easily. That's one thing daily. I do a morning walk with my dogs, which is something I never did before. I wake up at 6:30 every morning and I just do the walk, and regardless of the weather, and I don't take my phone, and I'm listening for birds, and I'm listening for the sound of my feet on the ground in a way I never did before. And if nothing else, even just 45 minutes of time solo to start my day has really made a difference. And, lastly, what I've been doing is what I call bookmarking, where bookending, not bookmarking. I start the day with an intention, and the intention is, I've actually been really doing more around the, like, what's one thing that I can keep in my head today around something I can control, that I can lean on when things feel like they're going sideways. And then the evening part of that, as I'm going to bed, is gratitude for either, okay, I thought about that intention, or I used that intention, or, hey, I didn't need that intention. Like, I'm grateful that I had kind of a more peaceful day today. But gratitude practice, I think intention and gratitude practices are, I would say to y'all who are listening, just try it and do it for 2 weeks and just see what happens. I'm not going to tell you like it's amazing, because everyone's reception of it will be different. But ritual for me, and there's a distinction between ritual and routine. Routine, what ritual does is it has this component of intentionality. And so when I say that it's been one of the biggest indicators for who I am during this time, you can create, intention can be created from the foundation of, what am I needing right now? What am I needing during this time? That's what the walk is. I created the ritual of walking with my dogs because I wanted to be alone in nature and move my body. And that was one thing I just needed. And so I just did it, right? And, the intention or the need could be, I need to slow down, or I need to connect with a friend. A ritual could be having a 10-minute phone chat with a friend every day because we aren't able to have that meaningful engagement, right? That's where ritual is so amazing, because it is grounded off of what is most needed and present. And they don't have to be big to be impact. I think that was the thing that, for me, I had a big misconception around ritual, because I thought they had to be these like grandiose acts, and they can be really small to make a change too. So I'm like a super fan of ritual now. It's like, who knew?
Oh, I love it. Well, I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'm going to open it up, if it's all right with you, Greer. I want to open it up to anybody in the audience that has a question that they want to ask or chat about. You can post them in the Q&A, or if you would rather, I can put you up on video and you can chat with us one-on-one, for everybody to see your face in all of your sweatpants that you're probably still wearing. So yeah, exactly. I did brush my hair today, so that was great. But okay, so get those questions ready is the moral of this story. I want to close out my portion of this with, what other important things can we be doing right now to help ourselves and to help our community and to help our businesses? It's kind of a big loaded question, but is there anything that we haven't chatted about that you are feeling people are coming to you and saying, this is one thing that I'm doing, or this is important, or that you're seeing that we haven't really talked about yet?
Yeah. Perhaps a few things. I think that I guess I'll start with like the individual piece, and I'm going kind of from my own perspective, what has been really helpful for me. We've kind of touched on some of this, but I would say giving yourself some room to attend to basic needs. I think the power of pressure, especially right now, to learn a new language and become a masterful baker and do all of these things as there's this new free time. And for some, yes, who have like unfortunately been in the spots of furlough and layoff, yes, some of your time is freed up, but emotionally and mentally, what is happening in our world, there might be literal time freed up, but mental time and space is not being freed up. So I would say, like, give yourselves a moment. I think the thing that has really changed a lot of my relationship to this is, what do I need? I'm actually gonna move from that place, not what I should be doing or what I feel like he's doing, and so I need to kind of, ladder up to that. I feel like just this like room to breathe. I would say too that the impacts that connection with self has made on me during this time has really surprised me. And again, I had to discover why that was important for me. And so really connecting and asking yourself, like, what are the things that you're up to and why? Do they actually feed your soul? Are really important questions to ask. So I think that attention to some of that. I mean, for my relationship with my husband too, in its own right, this strained us and put pressure on us. And so I would ask the question, like, what's most needed for he and I? And so now we have new rituals that have brought us together. And actually we're kind of the couple we were when we met, and in this really unexpected way, but it took me asking, like, what is needed community wise. I feel really passionately about this one, and I can speak to Steamboat. We have a truly amazing community up here, and a lot of people who are in really tough scenarios. And so I'm speaking to my own version of this, and I will ask y'all to inquire too, like, what does service to your community actually look like given your current life? What can you commit to, whether it's your time or your service or your attention or your advice or your mentorship or your friendship, right? Service and contribution look so many different ways. For me, it's looked like a lot of, panels and discussions and presentations. And, I've been offering some of the local business owners who are on the verge of losing businesses free coaching. That is the best thing I can do for them right now, because the support that they need is so severely trumping that expansion and that growth and that, that ego mind as well. And so I would ask yourself, like, given who you are in your communities, and given your circles and given the things that you're up to, like, what does serving your people actually look like? You've got the answers. It just requires asking the right questions to get there. So I would say that. And then with business, with your own companies, which is, I think, was the third part of this. Okay, here I'm going with psychological safety again. To the extent that you can, be the standard. Ask it of your employees, ask it of your leadership teams, ask that if you're not seeing it in your companies, ask them to come together, ask for meetings to talk about what's on your mind, pitch ideas of how you can be a helper and be of service. If you aren't talking to your consumers, fight for that, and fight for it in a really intentional way. And so I feel like that those are the best things we can be doing with our time and energy right now. So I know we kind of touched on some of that, but some of that felt new.
Yeah. Well, it's a nice recap of all of the great conversation that we've had today. So if you have a Q&A and you want to post it, amazing. If you just want to chat with us, just please do.
Britt, I saw
yeah. Yeah, exactly. Just chat. We love it. We love a good chat. We may or may not cry. Okay. Sylvia, thank you for sending something in. Just a comment, totally true about brand picking. I see myself now wanting to support companies that show some form of empathy in the way they're acting, with their employees, opening up the facilities, etc. Do you think brands need to repurpose during this time, or I guess moving forward?
And repurpose, how do you interpret repurpose?
Ooh.
Or Sylvia,
Sylvia, do you want to
I
pop on?
interpret repurpose. I don't know if it's a product or I like the question a lot.
Yeah. We can put you on microphone, Sylvia, or you can just type it, whatever works for you. I'm going to open up your mic, so if you want to talk, you can. Oh, the meaning of the brand, Sylvia.
Oh, repurpose the meaning of the brand.
Yeah.
I guess what I would say to that is pitching it as an extension of the meaning of the brand. You know, this isn't like, hey, we're rebranding and repurposing. And I'm not saying you're necessarily asking it that way, but just how it occurs for me is, I think a lot of brands are doing this. We're like, yeah, you know, historically, we have been a brand focused on this. And, you know, now we're turning our facilities into mask making, you know, manufacturers. We are, and it's kind of the yes and. You know, so I think that maybe a director of marketing would disagree with me here on you know, brand guidelines, et cetera.
Yeah.
But what I would say is that these are also impossible times right now. And I would think, and it sounds like, Sylvia, you've had this experience when you are able to relate to a brand and see their empathy show through that way, they've already repurposed their brand by doing that because they're standing out to you. So I would say if it aligns with purpose and value and it aligns with being a helper, that like famous Fred Rogers quote, like look for the helpers. You know, I think that is such a beautiful sentiment with this. And I don't know if I'm answering the question, but I think it is in a brand's best interest to show their humanness. I don't know that it means necessarily repurposing or rebranding or anything like that. But I do think you can stay with purpose and values and move from the track of, you know, the expansion growth.
And do so in a genuine way, right? Like don't force your empathy or make it feel disingenuous. I think that's probably the other key to this is being really truly genuine about it. And if you can't be, that's fine. And like no judgment, no harm, no foul, but also don't fake it because people can read right through that, I think.
You know, and I've seen a lot of this with some of like the bigger Titan brands that Titan as in Titan, not Titan as in loosen. You know, they didn't relate to their consumer base in a heartfelt way necessarily. And so they're up against a bigger challenge. And yet I have seen some do it really well where it's like, hey, you know, and I think the best way to do this is to name it. Like, I know you haven't related to us in this way in the past. And this has really changed us. Mm-hmm. And here's how it's changed us. I mean, you look at some of these airlines and, you know, I really feel for them, you know, and some of the airlines that haven't historically been, you know, the people's people and seeing a heartfelt email or a video from a CEO to talk about their experience. I'm like, wow, you know, I never knew that I would feel that for an airline CEO. And so I do think it is possible.
All right. Thank you, Sylvia, for sending that in. Robin has a question. How do I navigate the gray right now? I'm such a planner and calendar hound. It's very hard to not have things to look forward or to plan for. It's so hard to live in the moment for this long. Snaps, I agree to that. I want to be able to plan for next weekend and next year, and I just can't. So that's the first part of our question. So let's address that first, and then we can go into the second part of it.
Yeah. I understand that personally too. And I would say, you know, we get really held back when we're like, I can do this and I can't do this. I'm locked out of this. And so that whole thing's off limits. And therefore, I can do nothing. Right? Or if it can't look this way, then it can't look anyway. And I personally really understand some of that like binary thinking, the black and white. And I would say, you know, truthfully, all we have is today anyway. We actually don't have next weekend anyway, regardless of what we are or aren't able to do. And so that's kind of like one fold is like, what are things that I can have some say over today that actually fill my cup, the things I love to do, given this new terrain. And I was going to say one other thing. Oh yes. You know, with regards to the planning, like there's like giving yourself again some like grace with the grief of that. I'm really sad that I can't plan. And yeah, okay, we had next weekend. What are some things that can give me the feeling that that thing I was doing was going to give me? And can I be okay with that? I think there's just some shifting in, we're trying to still, we're mentally still in our old lives. And when we can come mentally into our new lives and say, okay, this is the new container for it, this is the new box. Yeah, it can't look like us going to Italy this year. Okay, and that thing was going to bring us together and we're going to see some new places. So what can we do to bring us together and see some new places and have it be legal?
Well, and that actually is the best segue into the second part of her question of there's still so much gray around what we can and can't do legally and morally. So how do we navigate the gray area of my friend still wants to quarantine and maybe I don't, or we shouldn't be driving to Utah or Wyoming to go camping, but we are anyway. How do we navigate that gray area, how it looks for us and how it looks for the people that we're interacting with?
Yeah, I mean, I've bumped up against this a lot as well. And boundaries. I mean, the amount of engagements that I've had, where people have invited us over for dinner and are really clear, like, oh no, it's all good. Like, we'll stay 6 feet away. And me saying, I'm just not comfortable with that, you know, and having the wherewithal to say, just because it's comfortable for you doesn't mean it needs to be comfortable for me. I would say, like, you've got your barometer of comfort, and I would really respect that and follow that, because it does no one a service if you are having happy hour with a girlfriend and she's not respecting safer at home and kind of like making you feel uncomfortable, and you're doing it anyway, right? Your level of engagement with that happy hour, you're cut off. You're pissed off, you're resentful. I'm not saying that like specifically at you, Robin, because I know you and you don't have the capacity for that. You're one of those jolly people I know. But really respect your boundaries. Like, they're there for a reason, and they're speaking to you. And with things like camping and knowing you shouldn't be doing it anyway, it's the same thing. It's like, don't do it then. Like the world, I feel like and this is where I do get kind of mama bear on science, is, you know, people are trying really hard to contain this thing as much as possible. And I think when individuals think that these things don't apply to them, it keeps this thing going longer, and it also keeps us at odds with one another. And it keeps us in that mode again of like, if I'm pissed off about how Katie's handling this thing and I stay stuck in that anger, then I'm not present for my own life, right? And so what are the things you need to do to just be present for your own life, including respecting your own boundaries? And that includes saying no to the friend, and then includes saying no to going camping in Utah. But maybe it means going camping in Southern Colorado, you know? So that's what I hope that answered it. That's just kind of my perspective on.
Robin laughed when you called her the most jolly person.
Well, she was.
Yeah, exactly. If you have one last question, we have time. If not, that's totally okay too. I guess at this point, if we're waiting for some or not, thank you guys so much for joining. I'm going to put Greer's email to her Windrose email. What the word? I'm like trying to type and talk, and it's just bad. So I'm just going to stop typing. Okay. I'm going to put Greer's email in the chat for everybody to see. Feel free to reach out to Greer directly. Obviously, she's a lovely human. And thank you so much, Greer, for your time and everybody that participated. And I hope that you all are well and safe and healthy and happy, or at least as happy as you can be, off and on in the roller coaster of emotions.
A lot of love.
Yeah, exactly. And if you need anything from me, yourwindrosedirection.com, right, Greer?
Yes.
Okay. So this is Greer. And then if you have any questions for me, Katie, I'm over at Galvanize. Please feel free to reach out to me directly as well. I'll put my email in there. And thank you guys so much for coming. Thank you to Boulder Startup Week for making this happen. and our sponsors and everybody. And I'm so thankful I'm going to close this out with gratitude. I'm so thankful for you, Greer, and I'm so thankful for Boulder and the community that we have, and everybody just being so open and vulnerable and willing to learn and chat. So
and thank y'all so much. It's Boulder Startup Week is something I love dearly, and this is a great way to be connected with it.
Agreed. Well, thank you, everyone. This is recorded, so if you want to go back and catch up on any of Greer's tips or tricks, or just listen to her soothing voice again, please, please feel free. It'll be up soon on I believe the Boulder Startup Week YouTube channel. So you guys have a lovely rest of your Thursday. If you live in Boulder, it's like the Thursday night bike rides. Happy Thursday. Woo! Woo! Bye, guys. I'm going to end this now. Have a good one.